All right, buckle up for a deep dive today. We're going to be looking at something pretty wild, the Dogon tribe of Africa and their knowledge of the Sirius star system.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that just grabs you. I mean, how could they know?
Right. We're talking about excerpts from a conversation with Robert Temple, by the way. He wrote the book The Sirius Mystery, and it's a real head-scratcher.
Absolutely. So the Dogon, they have this understanding of Sirius B. It's a white dwarf star.
Okay, so for folks who might not be super familiar with their astronomy, tell us a bit more about white dwarfs. What makes them so special?
Well, picture this. You take something as massive as our sun and you cram it into a space, well, about the size of Earth.
Whoa, talk about dense.
Exactly. Super dense. Now, here's the thing. Sirius B, it's invisible to the naked eye.
So how on earth did the Dogon know about it? They didn't have telescopes or fancy astronomical tools, right?
No, not at all. And yet, they knew about it. They even accurately described its orbital period around Sirius A, the main star. It's about 50 years, by the way.
50 years, wow. And that's not all. They also knew that Sirius B was incredibly heavy for its size, right?
Right, and that's something modern astronomers only confirmed, like in the 20th century. But the Dogon, they've had this knowledge for centuries. They say it comes from these beings they call the Nomo.
Okay, hold up. Nomo, that's a new one for me.
Mhm.
Who are they? And how did they supposedly transmit this knowledge? Fill us in.
Well, think kind of like a merfolk, but maybe a little more, intricate, more complex. They're amphibious beings. That's how the Dogon describe them.
Amphibious beings.
Or
From where, exactly?
from a planet, they believe. A planet within the Sirius system. And they came to Earth, shared their knowledge with the Dogon's ancestors. That's their belief anyway.
It sounds like something straight out of science fiction, but this is deeply ingrained in their culture, their religion. This isn't just a casual bedtime story.
Oh, absolutely. It's woven into everything. Their rituals, their cosmology, their entire worldview. Everything.
So they see them as like, what, gods? Or something else?
Not quite gods, more like, I guess you could say cultural heroes. Or messengers, maybe. But definitely important figures, pivotal figures.
Got it, got it. So where does Robert Temple fit into all this? He's the guy who really brought this whole story to the wider world.
Exactly. He presents the Dogon's beliefs, but he's really careful not to say, definitively whether he believes it or not.
He kind of dances around it, you're saying?
He does, uses phrases like, it's probably true when he's talking about their claims. Almost like he's trying to acknowledge the Dogon's beliefs without totally alienating, his skeptical readers.
Trying to walk that line, huh?
Mm-mm.
I get it. But he doesn't just stop with the Dogon, does he?
No, not at all. Actually, he sees these amphibious beings all over the place, in myths and legends all around the world.
Really? Like where?
Well, he finds them in Babylonian myths, Assyrian, Greek, even Chinese cultures.
Wow, all over the place, huh?
Yeah. And often they're associated with, bringing knowledge or civilization to humanity. It's a common thread.
So he's suggesting there might be a bigger connection here, like a shared archetype, maybe. Or even, like, a common origin for these stories.
Right. Maybe it's not just a coincidence. Maybe there's something more going on.
And he doesn't just stop at identifying them, right? He actually dives into specific descriptions of the Nomo, like what they look like and stuff.
Oh, yeah. He gets super detailed. Fishtails, obviously. But also a preference for water and even, difficulty walking on land.
So they're not exactly graceful land walkers.
Not really. No, he even explores connections to, octopus-like creatures. It's a really vivid picture he paints.
It's pretty mind-blowing. Now, this recurring theme of amphibious beings bringing knowledge, what do you make of that? Is it just a way to explain the unexplainable, or could there be something more to it?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. Think about it. Water. It's often associated with the unconscious, with the unknown, the depths,
Yeah.
the hidden depths.
So could these amphibious figures represent something emerging from those depths, something bringing knowledge, wisdom, that transforms human consciousness? Is that what you're getting at?
Maybe. It's something to think about for sure. It's like they represent a hidden source of knowledge, something beyond our everyday understanding.
Okay, I'm following you.
Yeah.
But this isn't just about the past, right? The Dogon, they also have a prophecy about the Nomo's return. The day of the fish, they call it, or the day of the sea creature.
Right, and it's a big deal in their culture.
So what's the deal with this day of the fish? What are we talking about here?
They believe the Nomo will come back, return to rule from the waters, and they'll establish new regulations on Earth, a whole new order.
Okay, wow. Now that's a prophecy.
It is, and it makes you wonder, what's the significance of them ruling from the waters, you
Yeah,
know?
what's up with that? What do you think?
Well, think about water. It's essential for life. It's adaptable. It can be gentle, but also incredibly powerful.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So maybe the day of the fish is about more than just a physical return.
Right, exactly. Maybe it's symbolic of a time when humanity has to, like, reconnect with those qualities, learn to live in harmony with nature, you know? Adapt, flow with the changes.
So it's a metaphorical transformation of human consciousness, a
Yeah.
shift towards a more, how do you say it, balanced way of living.
Yeah, something like that. And it reminds us that these myths, these prophecies, they often operate on multiple levels of meaning. They can be literal, symbolic, metaphorical, all at the same time.
So while the Dogon might believe in the literal existence of the Nomo and the return, their story could also hold a deeper meaning about the future of humanity, our relationship with the natural world.
Exactly. It's like a cautionary tale, you know, urging us to think about our choices and how they affect future generations.
I like that. Cosmic cautionary tale. And it's fascinating that these kinds of stories often come from cultures that are so deeply connected to nature.
Yeah.
Like the Dogon, they seem to have a different way of understanding the world, a more interconnected view.
Absolutely. They don't see themselves as separate from nature. They see themselves as part of it.
Makes you wonder if we've lost something in our modern world.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something to think about.
All right, well, before we wander too far off into the philosophical weeds, let's bring it back to the Dogon and their knowledge of Sirius. Now, didn't Temple also find some physical evidence to support their claims?
He did. He found iron statues depicting the Nomo.
Iron statues. How old are we talking?
He estimates they're about 350 to 400 years old.
Wow, so these aren't just recent creations. They have real historical weight. Anything else?
He also talked about cave paintings, other artifacts that, represent these beings.
So there's a tangible record of these beliefs. It's not just stories. It makes it all the more intriguing.
For sure. Adds another layer of mystery.
Speaking of mysteries, there's one more thing I'm curious about. The six-finger detail. Temple mentions the Dogon describing the Nomo with six fingers. And he finds similar references in other cultures, even like some early Christian depictions of Jesus.
Right, like that's a pretty specific detail.
It is. So what do you make of it?
Well, like a lot of things in mythology and folklore, the six fingers could be symbolic, representing something, otherworldly, divine.
Or maybe it's a literal representation, suggesting a different evolutionary path.
It's definitely interesting, and it makes you wonder what other hidden clues might be tucked away in these old stories.
Absolutely. It's like we're just scratching the surface.
Right, and that's what makes this whole deep dive so exciting. We're peeling back layers of history, mythology, cultural beliefs, and who knows what we'll find.
Okay, so we've got the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B, the Nomo with their fish tails and their role as knowledge bringers, the Day of the Fish prophecy, and even this whole six-fingered thing. It's a lot to take in.
It is, yeah, and we're just getting started.
So before we go any further, I think it's important to acknowledge that not everyone agrees with Temple's interpretations. There are folks out there who aren't convinced.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anytime you're talking about something as big and as controversial as, extraterrestrial contact, there are going to be different opinions.
That's just natural, I guess.
It is. It's important to approach this stuff with, like, a critical eye, weigh the evidence, be open to the idea that we might not have all the answers.
That's a good point. Well said. So before we move on to part 2 of our deep dive, I want to hear from you, listener's name. What stands out to you so far? What's got you hooked? Is it the Sirius B connection? The Nummo? The prophecy? Something else? Think about it, and we'll pick up a conversation in part 2 where we'll explore Robert Temple's wider research and we'll delve into some of that controversy surrounding his work.
Welcome back. It's really something, isn't it? How these stories about, amphibious beings that could have these deeper meanings, like about humanity's connection to knowledge, to the cosmos, maybe even our own evolution.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like they're tapping into something primal, something that, I don't know, like resonates across cultures and time.
Right. And, Temple, his research, it goes beyond just like, identifying these figures. He actually digs into their roles, what they represent.
Okay, I'm listening.
So a lot of these amphibious beings, including the Dogon's Nomo, they're often depicted as androgynous.
Androgynous. Could you break that down for folks who might not be familiar with the term?
Sure. Basically, it means having both male and female characteristics, but it's not just about physical appearance.
Okay, so more than just like having both sets of, physical parts.
Right. It's more about embodying both masculine and feminine principles, kind of balance.
A balance of energies, I get it.
Yeah.
So what do you think that means in the context of these stories? Like, why androgynous?
Well, a lot of creation myths, they feature deities that are androgynous. It suggests maybe a kind of wholeness or completeness before the separation into male and female.
So, by depicting these knowledge grubbers as androgynous, could these cultures be saying something about the nature of knowledge itself? Like it transcends our binary way of thinking.
Yeah, maybe. It's like they're saying true wisdom, true understanding. It comes from integrating both the masculine and the feminine, not just one or the other.
That's pretty profound. Makes you think about how, our modern view of gender, it can be so limiting.
It can. But anyway, Temple also points out that these amphibious beings are often connected to the creation of humanity itself.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember reading about that. They're often like shaping humans from clay or bringing them knowledge, like agriculture or writing.
Exactly, like the Sumerian god Enki. Associated with water and wisdom, he helps create humans. Or the Egyptian god Num. He's sometimes depicted with a ram's head, and he's also linked to water, molding humans on a potter's wheel.
It's almost like there are these bridge figures
Yeah.
between the divine, the cosmic, and the earthly realm, bringing that spark of human consciousness, that potential.
Right, like that evolutionary leap. When we emerged from the water, became self-aware.
Wow, that's powerful. It really changes how you think about creation and evolution.
It does, doesn't it? And it's not just about bringing us into being. They're also giving us the tools we need to thrive, like the Namo, sharing their knowledge with the Dogon, or other figures, teaching agriculture or language, art, all those
They're
things.
like the ultimate mentors,
Yeah.
setting us on this path to civilization.
Exactly. And there's this other interesting detail that pops up in these stories too. 6 fingers or 6 toes.
6 fingers, that's pretty specific. Where else does that show up?
Well, the Dogon described the Noma with 6 fingers, temple. He connects it back to the ancient Babylonian god Omanus. He's sometimes depicted with 6 fingers too. And get this, even some early Christian depictions of Jesus show him with 6 fingers.
Wait, seriously. Six-fingered Jesus. I've never heard of that. What do you think it means?
It's a good question, right? Like, what's the significance? And like, with a lot of things in mythology, there could be a few different interpretations. Maybe it symbolizes something. Higher knowledge, a connection to the divine. Or, who knows, maybe it really was a physical trait.
Maybe a sign of a different evolutionary lineage even. It's
Yeah.
pretty wild to think about. You mentioned earlier the temple. He's pretty cautious about actually saying what he believes about the whole extraterrestrial thing. But do you think maybe he's hinting at something here? Like, could these six-fingered beings be evidence of something beyond what we currently understand?
I don't know. It's hard to say for sure. He lays out a lot of evidence, that's for sure. But he also leaves room for you to, like, draw your own conclusions.
He's not trying to force his beliefs on you, is what you're saying.
Right. I think he wants people to think critically, explore the
I,
possibilities.
that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, like, spoon-feeding people a specific answer,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's about encouraging them to ask questions.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes deep dives like this so cool. It's not about coming up with all the answers. It's about opening up new ways of thinking, challenging assumptions, getting curious.
Well said. Okay, so we talked about some of the criticism around Temple's work earlier. Can you talk about that a bit more? Like, what are some of the main points of contention? What are people saying?
One of the big criticisms is that maybe Temple misinterpreted the Dogon's beliefs, especially about Sirius B. Some anthropologists, they say that the Dogon's knowledge of the star system might actually be more recent.
More recent than Temple suggests. Like, how?
Well, they think maybe it came from contact with, Westerners
Right.
back in the early 20th century.
So like cultural exchange. Yeah, that can definitely influence beliefs and traditions.
Right, and some scientists, they question how accurate the Dogon's descriptions of Sirius B really are. They say maybe it's not as precise or detailed as Temple makes it sound.
So maybe some of the information he's attributing to the Dogon is actually his own interpretation, his own assumptions.
It's possible. You always have to be careful with extraordinary claims. You have to really examine the evidence.
Right, of course. So are there specific examples of where Temple's interpretations are disputed?
Yeah, some critics, they point out that the Dogon's description of Sirius B as this small, dense star, Well, it doesn't really match up with how scientists understand white dwarfs.
How so?
While white dwarfs, they are super dense, but they're also incredibly faint. You need really powerful telescopes to see them.
So maybe Temple overemphasized certain parts of the Dogon's knowledge to fit his narrative.
Maybe. It's a possibility, and it shows why it's so important to have multiple perspectives when we're talking about this kind of stuff, complex subjects.
Right. It's not about blindly accepting one side over the other. It's about critically evaluating the evidence, coming to your own conclusions.
Exactly. And remember, even if some parts of Temple's work are disputed, it doesn't mean the whole story's bunk. The Dogon's beliefs, their connection to Sirius, the day of the fish, it's all fascinating, whether or not their astronomy is completely accurate.
I agree. It's like peeling back layers of an onion, you know? Even if you discard some layers, there's still something there at the core that's worth exploring.
Right, and that's what makes it so compelling. It's this ongoing mystery. And each new discovery, it just adds more layers of meaning, new perspectives.
It's like we're on a journey, not just of these ancient cultures and their beliefs, but of like our own understanding of the universe, humanity's place in it.
Yeah, and like any good journey, it's not just about the destination, it's about what you discover along the way.
Well said. Okay, so before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I want to circle back to the day of the fish, that prophecy.
Yeah, the Nomo's return, the whole New World Order thing.
It's a pretty fitting topic as we, go deeper into the spiritual and cultural significance of these beings. So tell me, what does this day of the fish actually entail? What's the significance for the Dogon people?
It's a big one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The Day of the Fish. It's a central prophecy, and it foretells this time when the Nomo are going to come back to Earth.
Come back, huh? So like a second coming type situation.
Kind of, yeah. But it's not just a quick hello and goodbye,
Oh, so what's the big deal?
It's like they believe it marks this huge change, a transformation, almost like a reckoning for humanity.
A reckoning, huh? What does that even mean? Like, what do they think's going to happen?
Well, they believe the Nomo will come back and basically, rule from the waters.
Rule from the waters. Okay, I'm intrigued. Keep going.
Yeah, and they'll bring a whole new order, a whole new set of rules for how humans should live. It's like they think the Nomo are going to hit the reset button, you know?
Yeah.
Like, fix all the stuff we messed up, restore balance.
Whoa, a cosmic reset button. That's pretty intense.
Yeah.
So it's not just about them coming back, it's about them changing everything.
Exactly. It's like a fundamental shift in how we live, how we interact with the world, everything.
Do they have any specifics about what this new order is going to look like?
It's kind of vague. The basic idea, though, is like harmony. A world where humans live in balance with nature, respecting the wisdom of their ancestors. Recognizing how everything's connected.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a pretty powerful vision, especially these days.
It is, right. It kind of makes you think about how maybe we're heading in the opposite direction.
Totally. So do they say when this day of the fish is supposed to happen?
No, there's no specific date. It's more symbolic. A point in the future when, we're held accountable.
Like a cosmic check and balance, you're saying?
Right. It's not about predicting the future. It's about reminding people to be responsible, like live in a way that would make the Nomo proud.
It's all about living up to their values, right?
Yeah.
Respecting nature, honoring the wisdom of the past.
Exactly. And it's interesting. This prophecy, it really connects back to that whole theme of amphibious beings as teachers, guides, bringers of knowledge.
Yeah. Even in their prophecy about the future, the Nomo are still those figures who bring change and what's the word, enlightenment.
Right. They represent this potential for transformation individually and collectively. It's not just a change in leadership, it's a change in consciousness, a whole new way of being.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it, how these stories, even the ones that seem, kind of out there, they can tell us so much about a culture, their values, their beliefs, how they see the world.
Totally. Mythology, it's not just about telling stories. It's a way to pass down knowledge, wisdom, moral codes. It shapes how people see the world, guides their actions.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Sirius mystery, I'm curious, what's the most compelling part for you? What really sticks out? What are you still thinking about?
Good question. I think for me, it's how everything kind of lines up. The Dogon knowing about Sirius B, the descriptions of those amphibious beings, and not just from the Dogon, all over the place. And then they're always bringing knowledge, starting civilizations. And that six-finger detail, it's like this puzzle,
And a pretty fascinating one, even if we might never have all the pieces.
True. But it makes you think, doesn't it? About history, the universe, where we fit in.
Exactly. It challenges you to question your assumptions, To consider possibilities you never thought of before.
And maybe that's the whole point, Embracing the mystery, being open to new ideas, even if they sound a little crazy.
Right. It's the journey, the exploration that matters.
Exactly. And who knows what we might find along the way.
Well, that's a great note to end on, I think. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Sirius mystery. Hope you enjoyed it.
And if you're curious to learn more, definitely check out Robert Temple's book, It's a Wild Ride.
And as you go about your day, maybe think about this. What if the day of the fish isn't a literal event, but a metaphor? A symbol for a time when humanity wakes up, realizes we're all connected, and starts living in a more harmonious way.
Something to ponder, right?
It is. So until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep your mind open. You never know what you might discover.